In the design section, the benchmarks deal with tools and construction materials, but there are no obvious benchmarks for computer technology. Algorithms are both tools and materials. This is, as I said before, this is where I stretched the standard to suggest that algorithms really are machines, but they're software machines. The problem is that if I'm going to try and teach algorithms to third graders, and this isn't presented until the 12th grade, I'm probably going to end up stepping on some toes or getting some parents worried or something like that. So why do they have these problems? Well, I think technophobia is one of the biggest ones. This is another quote from Papert. Humans learn a balkanized image of human knowledge separated by impassable curtains. And basically, we end up limiting ourselves constantly just by our presumption that we shouldn't go past a certain barrier. Books guide us through the mystery of computers, describing contraptions and gizmos. This is all, makes it all very mysterious. They imply that computers aren't a part of our daily lives. These days, almost everybody, with the exception, I suppose, of some older people living at home, don't know how to program their VCRs. Glamour is added artificially to interest the student in technology, frightening to the teacher. I think this is an issue with perspective as well. The teachers are fearful of this, and so we presume that the child will be too. You watch parents worry about their kids, even though the kid is perfectly fine walking across that I-beam, you know? Like in the Warner Brothers cartoons. Desire for immediate results, I think, derails the technology standards potential. They obviate the purpose of the lessons. They make the lessons suggest that this is what you're supposed to learn instead of finding out what the kids can get from these lessons. So when I was doing this paper, I wanted to find out why I was missing on so many points, and so I investigated the other standards. The technology standards use technology to study other subjects, and this was a bit unique to the technology standards. I didn't notice this in the other areas. Nothing in the science standard, even the science and technology, dealt with computer science at all. The math standard mentions algorithms in grade 5 onward, but more as a means of solving equations. And grades 11 and 12 talk about constructing algorithms for multi-step and non-routine problems. Now, this begins to get to it, but the whole focus there is on mathematics and not solving other problems. And then the other curiosity that I incessantly found was that neither science nor math, the standards, involved any mention of ethics whatsoever. Improving the technology standards, then, is the gist of what I wanted to come here for. I wanted to mostly point out in what follows that computers really aren't typewriters. They shouldn't merely support learning, but should themselves be studied. And that computers are uniquely qualified to broaden education and enhance interest in a competitive and marketable area. As the standard said at the beginning, those hopeful quotes, they really know that technology is going to be the wave of the future and that people should be learning this stuff, but they're not. We don't have a place for it, really. So instead of misapplication, I want to apply these things. And computer science embodies general methods for learning and problem solving. I think it is appropriate, actually, for many subjects because of its flexibility. Like math or computer science, computer science supports other disciplines. Programs can conjugate verbs in a foreign language, the oasa amosan in Spanish or something like that. Diagram English sentences. Logically diagram arguments in a debate. That doesn't happen until high school, I suppose, but and then extract and analyze data in a social studies or science class. There's also art examples. There's lots of places that technology can be used. The fundamental ideas behind computer science can be used, but I don't think that they achieve that in the standards themselves. Another big issue is the social freedoms. Teachers and students should be aware of the abundance of patent-free or copyleft technology in media, and this became more apparent to me a little bit later. I'll show you a slide. The EFF, if anyone, I think most of the people here have probably heard of it, and also the Free Software Foundation are dedicated to freeing media and software from innovation, or for innovation and study. Ibiblio hosts Project Gutenberg, which digitally catalogs 10,000 books in the public domain. This is a great place to find things like Grimm's Fairy Tales, the original version of Dr. Dolittle, if you really want to spark some debate about censorship. The technology standards recommend students insert copyright-free images into multimedia presentations. I thought this was a bit interesting. This is one of these examples where they're emphasizing something I don't think needs to be emphasized. And that's a direct quote from that. So what they didn't mention, though, is that GIF was patented until it just finally expired. And JPEG's been controversial ever since the patent claim against its compression algorithm. PNG, however, which they don't mention, is patent-free and open format. Not only can PNGs be used without concern, but the associated algorithms can be studied. The libraries, or the source code for the libraries, is all over the place. In the very least, we can spark academic discussions for students to understand how the technology affects society around them. I want to de-glamorize computers. Computers are regarded as addictive already, but while school is not, and this isn't because the technology is, isn't boring. It's not because the technology is cool. Papert attributes a child's affinity for computers to the computer's ability to create an environment that nurtures self-development. Another quote from one of his books is that children are at risk because they do not have access to a wide immediacy for exploration and have only limited sources that they can address for questions. Oh, and there's an important note on that one. Glamour is not necessary to entice children because children's disinterest with learning proceeds from a limitation on how immediately and effectively their inquisitiveness can be sated by their own effort. That's basically a restatement of that. Esteem. A child builds his or her esteem by being comfortable with his or her own knowledge and abilities. Consider the farm children who kept old tractors by ingenuity and tinkering. Papert wonders whether the opacity of modern machines is a danger to the learning environment. And as I've stated before, I believe that this is so. And the Free Software Foundation is encouraging people to open these ideas up so that we can study them more openly, more freely. Children have the ability to understand new concepts in technology while very young. We just don't give them credit for it in general. The standards shouldn't hide from students the power of the computer under the veil of applications, which is what my biggest concern is with most of the technology standards, where they're showing kids how to use spreadsheets and things like this without showing them the underlying principles. In a book, Children and the Internet, research put an English language kiosk in a Delhi ghetto, New Delhi, like in India, where none of the inhabitants had any exposure to computers or understood much English. But within a few days, 5 to 16-year-old kids were using this kiosk to do browsing. They even discovered that there was a camera hidden in the thing and disabled it and sent an email to the researchers saying that they shouldn't be spying on them. And then the other interesting point is that in this entire 3 months that kiosk was there, not a single adult went near the thing. So the computer science would stimulate students to think about how they think. And children who understand themselves and can answer their own questions are empowered and worthy of our esteem. I would ask the questions like, how do you put your pants on in the morning of adults? And the initial response is, well, what do you mean? Isn't it obvious how I put my pants on? But as I begin to get deeper into the questions about how they put their pants on, they realize my intention, and that's to break things down into something very small, where they're realizing that they've actually followed a procedure. There's a disclaimer on this because of the initial critique in the beginning. The ISTE, which I said was the publisher of the technology standards, they also sponsor a lot of other books. One of them was Ideas and Strategies for the One Computer Classroom, which I think is extremely appropriate, the contents of it. It's good because the lessons are taught at very young ages on a variety of topics. And because it's designed for a one-computer classroom, the lessons show that computer science is more abstract. Computers are necessary only to examine the outcome. So these kids could get together into these groups, they could write their programs, and then go and put the programs in. And I don't think anyone in the room is old enough for this, but in the good old days, that's even before my time, you used to have to do that on the mainframe. They do batch processing. The programmers work all day long punching Chad out of these cards, and then at the end of the night, they'd all get their time, and they'd go and throw these in. Well, kids could do the same thing, and I think they get more out of it because it's going to involve more thinking then. They're not just going to keep typing, running, breaking the program and coming back to it. And I think as adults, we can do this too. I see a lot of paper wasted where I work because people just keep printing out buggy programs. I thought I had some more notes on these, but the blurb that was on the website for Nauticon, I think, covered this, but it's worthy of emphasis. If education is to advance to the next generation, students must study the underlying concepts and improve them, to build on them and breed them together to form hybrid constructs to solve the problems of their day with significant data of their day. Papert wrote a parable of some teachers that went back in time, some teachers from the future that went back in time, because we don't have a time machine now, we only have one in the future. So they went back in time and went to a classroom, and they did not know what was being taught, but they understood the need for the teaching, and they understood the patterns of the teaching. So we don't know what they're going to need tomorrow. To teach them anything today, everything that I learned in school, now as a computer programmer, I've completely outgrown most of that, with the exception of the master's that I took, and I don't really even remember most of that now. But they can't build a better database engine if they're just using front ends. And they can't develop faster methods for using prepackaged spreadsheet formulas either. They need to understand more what's underneath the hood. There's a few things that I missed when I was throwing this thing together, and I wanted to get more notes on it, but I thought that I wouldn't have time. As it seems, I'm probably, it's a good time, I guess. There's a lot of research that shows that this, and there were a few other speakers that covered this earlier too, that when you open these ideas up, suddenly they become the whole world's resources, and you have to make yourself more significant. You have to stand out in other ways then, not just by using that technology. And so as far as resources go, it's something that we can take advantage of. Learning science teaches students how to think about the world. Show students respond best when instruction is personalized and when the lessons are self-taught. This is really crucial in the schools where the student-teacher ratio is high. When you don't have a lot of students, or when you don't have a lot of teachers, when you've got too many students per teacher, a lot of students get relegated to the side. You know, they begin misbehaving. Well, if these guys are engaged in something, if they're teaching themselves something, then they probably won't be as troublesome. And they'll likely be learning something rather than getting into trouble. Also, there was some stuff on homeschoolers that I found. And I want to acknowledge that a lot of those websites are very good. And then one thing I didn't cover in the the area about trademarks is that Microsoft is giving a lot of their software to schools, but then they end up, on occasion, some rare occasions, some pointed occasions, suing these schools because now they're free software, they didn't upgrade it, now their licenses have expired, and so I think that using these proprietary software applications, instead of either doing their own stuff or getting something from the Free Software Foundation, using Linux, using open source software, it becomes precarious, it becomes dangerous for these schools to do this. Because they're going to end up in a spot like this, potentially. There was a graph also. There was a graph also, and I didn't even write this down as something I should cover if I get done quick enough, but there's a bunch of research that was done on both minorities and also females. In general, it's thought that women aren't interested in math and science subjects. There's been considerable research showing that they can be, depending on how it's presented. And again, as teachers, most of these teachers, especially coming from old schools of thought, they're presenting this material to these students in a way that we as adults communicate. Even adolescents begin to think differently than children do. Well, this research that they've done with Papert at the MIT Education Labs is that because if you teach kids the way they learn, if you teach to their learning abilities, they are capable of learning all this stuff. And then the same goes for minorities and also for women, or girls in this case. If you present this material in a way that doesn't immediately turn them off, if they can relate to something immediately, then they can develop a love for learning this stuff in the end. I also brought some materials, and in fact, on the way On the way here, I picked this up, and this was just today. And